Michael Gove also tried to ban us.
Did he?
Yeah, he did.
Tried to ban you?
The government, remember the new extremism definition, and they put a whole bunch of us on a list.
Really?
Yeah, did you miss that? I think a lot of people just couldn't process that imams and mosques elected me. And then obviously in my journey into Muslim leadership, I really understood what was going on and how deep it was, and it affected like my ability to get a job in law. The normalization of the dehumanization of Muslims, right? And so part of me becoming the Secretary General was being sick of being misrepresented by people within our communities who you just cringed at. Please, why have you put them on TV?
In today's very special 10th ever episode of Muslim Money Talk, I'm really pleased to be joined by a guest who you might better recognize from Sky News or her appearances on BBC or on the front page of newspapers, Zara Mohammed, the Secretary General of the Muslim Council of Britain, an organisation built to uplift and empower Muslim communities across the UK for the benefit of society as a whole. Zara shared with us how she first came into leadership while she was at university and how she rose to prominence both at FOSIS and now over at Muslim Council of Britain, how she's dealt with some of the trickier interviews facing off with major personalities in British media, and how she's dealt now with some of the most turbulent times within British Muslims' living history, whether it was dealing with the protests around Gaza, as well as recent unrest focused mainly on Muslims. As always, I'm your host, Areeb Siddiqui, and this is Muslim Money Talk. Before we begin, we actually noticed only about 10% of you are subscribed to the podcast. So if you like what you're listening to and you want to hear more from us and see more things Muslim and money related, then please consider subscribing and, of course, leaving this episode a like and share it with your friends, leave us a comment or a review, because it really, really does help us out and help more people to find us. Thank you. Now back to the show. Assalamu alaikum. Zara, thank you so much for joining us today.
Wa alaikum assalam. My pleasure to be here. It's a super cool podcast.
I feel like we've only met in person once before, but I feel like I'm very familiar with you, whether it's seeing you on Sky News or on BBC.
I have an effect on people. Like, didn't I see you on the news? I was like, yeah, probably.
It's like, yeah, Zara's always in my house. Some way, just on the TV.
Yeah, your uncles probably know mosque community probably, but yeah, you know.
For sure. You know, I'd love to delve into it. I think we can have an amazing conversation around leadership and community and what's going on in the world today. But I'd just love to know, as a child, did you ever think you'd be doing what you're doing today?
No. I mean, I think I thought of like, you know, I could be like a painter, artist or something, you know. I once had a post office set. I thought, you know what, maybe like the postal communities where I belong. Yeah. No, I mean, I was very creative as a young person, a little bit of a geeky bookworm type. But I think it wasn't really until university that I found this kind of social justice. I don't even know if that's what I am, but I was kind of brought into positions of leadership because I took on responsibility. I'm the eldest as well, and regarding my siblings as the bossy one.
How big is your family?
So I'm just the eldest of four. It's pretty,
wow, okay.
It's a pretty it's reasonable, isn't it?
Well, for today's standards in the UK, that's pretty big.
That's pretty big.
Yeah.
But I think our parents' standard, they went a lot bigger than that.
Yes,
so.
of course.
But yeah, I mean, I think the journey's really been, I didn't even know what a Secretary General was. Never mind seeing anyone like myself on TV in a positive way. You know, we were the kids of like post 9/11,
yeah, of
lots
course.
of that stuff. So when you're growing up, you just kind of think, yeah, your parents want you to get like a good job.
So you did law at university?
Yeah, I did law and then I did international human rights law. So I was very much like advocacy. And the thing that triggered me was I attended a seminar about human rights law and religion. And there was this whole thing around Islam and faith had no role in it. And I was kind of like, not really sure if that really works. And I went to the library and I could only find one book on Islam and human rights.
So this was in Strathclyde?
Yeah.
Strathclyde University in Glasgow. Okay.
And I was like, no, I'm going to do something about it. I'm going to do a master's.
Wow, okay.
And so I think what I realized was there's such a big intersection between international law, human rights, Muslims, and just advocacy. And I just kind of felt we were so misrepresented.
I don't know if you're old enough to remember 9/11, but maybe more so 7/7. Yeah. I think we were both pretty young at the time, but do you feel like it had an effect or things began to change for you and your community? I think I was too young to realize. Obviously, we knew it was a negative effect because every time you looked at the TV, it was all horrible stuff and you feel anxious. I think it's not when you're
an adult or young adult, like that you really realize. So for example, I didn't put my headscarf on until second year of university.
Oh, okay.
So when I became really visible, I mean, you're brown, so there's that, but I didn't really face much hate crime or abuse. But when I put my headscarf on, it was really weird. My colleagues at university were treating me differently.
Really? Oh, because you'd gone through a whole year
Yeah,
as
and they're
Zara.
like, what's going on? And you got the hijab on, and I was doing a law degree. So some were super supportive and like, wow, that's really great. What's that all about? But others were really uncomfortable and made me feel very uncomfortable. And then public transport, I was suddenly feeling a lot more conscious.
Okay.
And I had incidents when I'd take the train where...
But there's so many Muslims in Glasgow.
Yeah, but compared to London, I mean, it's one of those things, though, isn't it? You just realize how different you are.
Yeah.
But in my law degree, there was hardly any.
Oh, I see.
So it's not... We concentrate in our areas, but, in the wide world. So I think what I realized was like, wow, like people are affected by this. And what's going on here? And then obviously my journey into Muslim leadership, I really understood what was going on and how deep it was. And it affected like my ability to get a job in law.
Oh, so you were applying?
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow, okay.
And even my friends who were like so one of them anecdotally changed his name. And he got loads of job, loads of job interviews with his anglicized name and hardly any with his.
So they were screening for Muslim sounding names.
Yeah.
I saw a TikTok about this that went viral recently where someone did an experiment and changed it.
That's true. So that was the kind of, so in some ways you're not really conscious of the reality because you're coming from a kind of open-minded, well, I've got a degree, I speak English and, I'm born here. So surely, but no, I think that kind of inbuilt racism, Islamophobia is definitely there. I remember colleagues in law talking about, the pub chats and how it gets really racist after a certain point or, So yeah, I think all of that was really formative for me, but it was really my want and desire to serve that I think kind of came through joining the Islamic Society, of course. And then I did the Dawah stall. So funny story. The person in charge of ordering the T-shirts accidentally ordered bright yellow. So we were like,
what were they meant to be?
So they were just like blue, like a dark color, but bright yellow. So we're doing the Dawah stall in the library. We used to give out the booklets or whatever. We've all got these bright yellow T-shirts, so you can't miss us. And literally some Muslims were like, oh my God. And then my law colleagues were like, so what are you doing there, Zara? I was like, oh, we're just dispelling misconceptions about Islam and Muslims. Would you like a Quran? So those were like the early days though, Things have moved on a lot. But I remember being very visibly Muslim was challenging.
And I guess it's because you came into it, in your late teens, that must have been a real culture shock for you.
Yeah.
And I suppose is that what drove you to feel like I need to make a change in this space? I need to do something about this?
I think it was really organic. So when I was part of the Islamic Society, we had students coming from all over the world. And I remember actually it was a Palestinian sister who came in crying into the prayer room. So I used to be situated in the prayer room a lot. And I was like, what's happened? She was verbally abused she was in Students' Union and she was in lift and she had her scarf and kind of a bio and someone's really racist towards her. She was sitting there crying and I said, well, this isn't good enough. We need to do something about it. And she's like, there's no point. No one's going to do anything. So obviously I marched myself right up to the Student Union, spoke to the president. I said, what are you going to do about this? This is shocking. They got the CCTV footage. They got barred. They apologized. And she's crying again. I'm like, why are you crying now? And she was just so happy. She's like, I just didn't think this could happen. And I had loads of incidents like that where I was really engaging with the system and really understanding, issues with the prayer room or issues with lecturers not letting students pray Jummah, or get out of class. So you think all those things we used to go through in winter where all the prayers.
This was only 10 years ago.
I know, but this is the thing though. We feel like, oh, this is just normal, but at that time it was still really unfamiliar.
So it's changed so much.
But a lot of us had to do that hard work to make it normal.
Kids today will never get it.
Never appreciate. We had to pray in stairwells,
for sure,
corridors, doing wudu in the sink and all that stuff. So I think there's we'll call ourselves a pioneering generation. But the point being is I kind of realized that I could advocate. And actually that I had an ability, but I still did not see where I'm sitting today as a place that I'd be going to.
So at the time you were still trying to get into law? So you were applying
Yeah,
for
so I
training
was just
contracts.
like, trying to study,
Yeah.
obviously getting myself involved in lots of extracurriculars, which were distracting me. So the next big step was FOSIS.
FOSIS. So that's
because
a
I was
federation of
Islamic
students' Islamic societies. So you became president of that.
Not just yet, so Scotland chair,
Scotland chair, okay.
vice president, and then the first female president.
First female president in history.
Yes, in that time, I think it was its 54-year history.
So that's kind of crazy because when you think of Islamic societies, I think a lot of people feel very hot and cold about them because it's either I had an amazing experience.
You're either like really diehard or you just avoid.
Or you avoid entirely, right?
Yeah.
And there's always this like tension between the brothers and the sisters leadership because there's always like a head brother and head sister, but like who's really in charge
Yeah, ooh.
is the thing, you know? So, but in this case, there's only one leader, and this time it was just you. Was that difficult? Did people feel weird about it?
I think it was different. But the great thing about students is we're probably in some ways also really, I like to think we're more open-minded, we're more diverse, right? So at that time, I'd gone through the ranks and we were, so the Islamic Society, we were like one of the strongest in the country, and then Scotland sure were the strongest region. So I kind of earned my stripes in terms of we were making an impact.
Yeah.
But presidency, I think, was really challenging because obviously, it's been around for such a long time and lots of people encouraged me to go for it. And then obviously it's an election. So I remember 500 students in front of me all staring at me, and it was, and people voted for me. And I think that's the thing, though. I had the legitimacy from Muslim students to say, we want you to be our president. And I just kind of always thought, look, I don't need to make it about myself or the gender or whatever. It's got to be about what do Muslim students need today and what are we doing?
And ultimately, who's best for the role?
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
But it was difficult. It was difficult.
Really?
Yeah, because as you know, ISOCs are all different.
So what were some of the more difficult moments?
I think, at that time, so we kind of represent about 120 Islamic societies. So I was like, okay, we're going to go visit them.
So what exactly does FOSIS do? I suppose people that you don't know, you're basically looking after every single university's Islamic society. And are you advocating for them? And
So, yeah, I think the way to see it is in 1963, when FOSIS was set up, we hosted, you can imagine at a time where the students at university were coming from abroad. And they created kind of societies to have a sense of belonging, prayer rooms, and all that kind of stuff. A really early days thing. So remember, the British Muslim student was a little bit later to the party. So they created this kind of federation to bring a unifying body. It was all about hold fast the rope of Allah. So it was all about bringing young Muslims together, the development of being a student leader, a Muslim leader. So there's the advocacy piece, but the unity piece was the most important, and hosting like Malcolm X. So it was the conference was the most important place.
They hosted Malcolm X?
Of course.
Wow.
Yeah, I know, guys, if you haven't joined. Some of the biggest names in scholarly history were hosted by FOSIS because it was the heart of student activism.
Wow.
It was the place where everybody came together. There was a magazine. There was amazing and rich, diverse history. But then those early leaders saw we've got Muslims who were born in this country, and that then the kind of organization took a change in terms of taking care of communities here and students here. And as you could see, Muslim students are a massive kind of part of the student community. Our needs have changed, representation. So when I was around, like student unions were having loads of Muslim presidents and vice presidents, loads. So there was a lot going on in NUS. And even if you think about like the counterterrorism history in students, they were spying on Muslim prayer rooms, speakers were banned all the time. It was really difficult times. And so FOSIS was that kind of advocacy part of challenging lobbying. But at the same time, also just stuff like we did the campaign like Believe and Do Good or Palestine Conference or Quran Camp or, So there's quite a lot of mosques that have probably hosted us and we've had sleepovers in.
Wow.
I know. I won't say which days, but because obviously now I'm Secretary General. And I'm just thinking, gosh, we had we had a conference here where all of us were, in the rooms upstairs, sleep, because we'd sleep at mosques,
Wow.
But yeah, it was an amazing time. But it was really, being the leader of that was challenging. Because our communities are so diverse and very opinionated.
So what were some of the more challenging times?
I think the kind of clampdown of Muslims being able to host speakers was really difficult. So
they weren't
at that
allowed.
time,
When was
Prevent,
it?
Prevent was really
when
strong.
Prevent came
it
up.
was
So
really strong.
so Prevent was a government initiative to basically try and root out terrorism within communities.
Right.
And it allowed people to report anything which they saw as untoward directly to this Prevent hotline.
That's right. But it was disproportionately impacting Muslims because we were typecast
Of
as
course.
the suspects. And for students, they were seen as the hotbed of where it was happening. Some of the names that we know about, were featured. Young people going, maybe it was just before young people were going abroad. But I think at this time it was really around, universities were like, you can't have speakers on campus. And I think there was a kind of this idea, again, we were fighting against system. But I think other things that were hard is that a lot of students struggle in terms of being at university, hate crime or discrimination. I think also the lack of Islam awareness still was a real, but from a leadership point of view, I mean, we have all the usual issues that we always have, but from a leadership point of view, it was about, you've got really strong ISOCs, like, we don't need FOSIS, what do you guys even do? You have lots of ISOCs in like Cornwall and Plymouth and Exeter, right? Like in the middle of nowhere, they're like defending Islam by themselves, and trying to like think about how do we bring people together and what about their development?
Yeah.
Because once they leave this university, they're going to go into that world, and how are they going to be prepared for what's quite challenging?
Yeah, of course. Because I think it's my real, I was kind of involved in Islamic. So I went to University College London.
Okay.
I was kind of involved in the Islamic Society. We get involved in the charity weeks and all that. But the community that I loved the most was actually when I started at Deloitte, and they had an amazing Deloitte Muslim network, and they would do loads of things, loads of events, Eid parties and Ramadan events, and that's where I got into Islamic finance, because myself and there was a manager who's now a director over in the UAE, Hazra Munshi, who she really kind of pioneered this Islamic finance education system, which is weird because like no one else was really doing it at the time, but she was inviting all these colleagues who had no idea about it to show what Islamic finance was and doing this lecture series basically. So that was kind of my idea of like, okay, this could be really powerful if used in the right way. But sorry, I'm trying not to make this about me.
I was going to ask you, like, where are you? Where were you on the spectrum of? But I mean, like you say, like life brings you lots of different kinds of opportunity, and everyone's so different. And for me, FOSIS was really formative to my leadership journey, because the challenge wasn't all the external stuff. It was being a leader. It's my first time being this national representative. And a young person and having no clue really what I'm doing.
So did it set you up nicely for becoming Secretary General of the biggest?
To be honest, like nothing. Yeah, I mean, being one of the most senior faith representatives in the country and dealing with like...
Definitely the most public facing,
yeah,
I would say.
Public facing, the largest Muslim umbrella body,
sure.
At a time when Muslims are always in the news, and then having to like, I always knew I was going to have to do those difficult stories. When I was got elected, there was like 2 terror attacks. You got the Gaza stuff, and now this year, oh my gosh,
I know.
We'll get into it, I'm sure, but
yeah.
And then also being the first woman Secretary General and the youngest, and from Scotland. It's like, did I just ask for a lot of really complicated situations?
So how did that happen? So you finished at FOSIS?
I finished at FOSIS, and we were a member of the Muslim Council Britain.
Right,
so we're part of the family, right?
Of course.
And I had attended some of the meetings, and they were like, well, we'd love for you to join our leadership team. And if I'm honest, I was like, not really sure. Looks a bit old. Looks a bit masculine. I don't know where I fit into this. But then I did join, and I became an assistant secretary general for my predecessor's second term.
Okay.
And then I think for me what was really interesting was the Christchurch terror attack.
Yes, of course.
That was really shocking, and it kind of made me realize, wow, like there is a need for, because most in this country were like, what if it happens here? What about that? The other thing was COVID.
Oh, because you started in 2021.
Yeah.
Like right at the beginning of COVID.
Yeah, 20, exactly.
Yeah.
So no, I was elected in 2021 as the Secretary General.
Yes.
I was in MCB.
Oh, okay. So you were already there.
Just kind
obviously.
of like, but not in the hot seat as I am today.
Okay.
But at that point, so I saw the need for it, and I understood the relevance. But did I want to become the Secretary General? No. Did I think I could become for me, that was like out of my periphery of, because it's such a big job. And now I'm in it. I remember the when I was elected, alhamdulillah, I was contested as well, I should say. It wasn't easy to be elected. The margin of error in this role is like 0, because anything you do could become a front page headline.
Wow.
Right? You are responsible, not because you want to be or because technically you should be, but when stuff goes down concerning Muslims, yeah, they're coming to you, right? So when there was like terror attack or whatever, I knew I was going to have to take those stories on. But, I've been on the front page of the Daily Mail.
I know.
I did that famous Women's Hour.
I was going to ask you about that, because that was the first time I heard about you, actually, Because that in itself became a news story. So for people who do not know, Zara appeared on Women's Hour, I think in the first week.
That day 4.
You were elected, day 4.
Yeah.
And I think they lured you in saying it was going to be a very nice, soft
It was really
interview.
lovely, yeah.
And, Women's Hour continues to this day. But I think was it Emma Barnett who interviewed you? And then the first question out the gate was, how many female imams are there?
Yeah. I was just sitting there. I mean, obviously before me, there was this like lady on and some lovely story and she was super nice to her.
Yeah.
And then with me, like the tone changed. And obviously we're in a Zoom room, so there's other people there and they're all just kind of like looking a bit.
Oh, it wasn't in person?
No. This is COVID.
Oh,
We were in lockdown,
of course.
Or we were I think we were in lockdown actually. So anyway, she starts building this question up. And I'm like, okay, something's like really off here. And then she goes, so your organization claims it's for women include, whatever it is, yeah. But can you tell me? And I'm just like, I was like looking at my FAQ bank of like, what? Where is this? Is this something people are talking about? But it was a complete kind of setup.
You did really well handling that. Did you go in with all the media training beforehand?
No, I didn't even think I was going to get elected. So, Also, honestly, I didn't think it was that big a story.
Gosh.
I think I'd break the news and it was so huge. When I went on, I just thought it was going to be like it's Women's Hour. It shouldn't be like it wasn't like it was a response to a big political story. It was me getting elected. That's the story.
But yeah, you became the story.
But this show was really premised around taking the story away from that to something about making us archaic and
Yes.
And it was just a preposterous thing. So the reason that I was calm was I asked myself a really important question, which I think we always have to ask ourselves in positions of leadership. In this moment, how do I want to be defined, right? Do I want to be angry, defensive Muslim? No. The people who elected me deserve better than that. And I'm going to respond with dignity because this isn't the moment I want my tenure in leadership to be remembered by. It needs to be beyond that. So I played it cool. I think it's annoyed her even more. But afterwards, there was a massive backlash and an open letter. My face on the front page of The Guardian print edition. And I became really famous, But it was they call it baptism of fire. Because that whole week I did so many tough interviews. It wasn't just that one. But I just said at the end of that week, like, stop. I didn't get elected for this.
Oh, you told your media team, like, let's not take it.
It was a media circus and it was all about they were framing me. I didn't even have a narrative. I just got elected. I didn't even thought about what I was going to do.
So were there other interviews of that ilk where people were like, oh, okay, look, this woman is now leading a Muslim organization. Look how backwards this religion is.
So there was a commentator from a certain right-wing publication that said I was a pleasant face away from a bearded, cross-eyed man. And I quote, they said I was a puppet and a token. Yeah, you can Google it. I was a puppet and a token. And that, I was just, I was just like a face to something, but really I was being controlled. It was all of that. And then I had some tough interviews where I asked about grooming gangs and terror, all the usual tropes, and really difficult. I think a lot of people just couldn't process that imams and mosques elected me.
Yeah, that you've been elected.
Majority of men elected. I was elected officially. And it was a democratic process. I think that just kind of blew them away. But a lot of people were really happy. And so I had a lot of work to do after that.
Thank you for listening to Muslim Money Talk. If you like what you've heard so far, you might be interested in checking out what we do at Kestrl, the Muslim Money app. Kestrl is a service that helps Muslims who want to grow their wealth without having to compromise, whether it's on their belief or user experience or price. I founded Kestrl because of how fed up I was at how poor Islamic financial services were in this country. Often people didn't use them because of how bad the user experience or customer service, and indeed how high on price they were. So Kestrl was the answer to that. If you download the Kestrl app today, it can help you by creating a budgeting plan. Plug in whatever bank account you have and it will create an auto budget just for you. You can then tell us what goals you're saving for and we'll save towards them automatically into pots, and then crucially link you towards Sharia compliant investment and savings products as well. So download Kestrl today and try it out for yourself. Now back to the podcast. Gosh, so I mean, after things cooled down, right, the whole media frenzy had died down a little bit. How did you reframe yourself and say, look, I don't want to be the story anymore. Let's actually make some change and make some differences in a landscape that is increasingly becoming more and more aggressive, I suppose, towards us. I mean, look at just at the time of filming in the last month alone. It's weird to think, but only 2 weeks ago, we were all afraid to go outside, and we were telling our mums and sisters and like, anyone who's wearing a hijab or looks visibly Muslim, be careful. There's like stories of acid attacks and women getting beaten up and all kinds of things happening. And now everything's moved on. People seem to have forgotten about that. Do you think there's a weird sort of dissonance within this country?
Yeah, I mean, when the riots happened, I remember my father saying to me, we had to fight the National Front in the 80s. Of course. This is the last time. So we don't have this historical memory because we weren't alive around that time. But he said, at that time, the police didn't take it. The state wasn't with the communities, the police wasn't with us. It was just like the communities had to fight for themselves and had to racism was still more or less acceptable. And, it was the immigrants. And here we are, witnessing actual terror inflicted to communities. I mean, they're literally so confident. They're making a list of all the places they're going to attack. And they're mosques and Muslims and, refugee centers. So I think that dissonance comes from the normalization of the dehumanization of Muslims, right? And so part of me becoming the Secretary General was being sick of being misrepresented by people within our communities who you just cringed at, please, why have you put them on TV? But also, well, I'm born here, I'm third generation. Like, why are we still having this talking about, whether I belong and my identity politics? Like, how ridiculous. And we are now witnessing all these riots, attacking mosques and community centres, thinking, who are you attacking and what is this actually about? So we spoke to the Imam in Liverpool.
Adam Kelwick.
Yeah, Sheikh Adam. Yes. And so I asked him, I said, we obviously were very brave when you went out there. He goes, yeah. And I said, but did you ask them why did you do this? And he goes, yeah, I did. What was your motivation? He said, not a single one actually said Southport.
Really?
They had their own grievances, a lot of it down to social deprivation. So poor communities hating on other poor communities, and
it's a tale as old as time.
Yeah. But a lot of that we saw disinformation, the rise of very extremely inflammatory far-right rhetoric, but also I think what we would consider the fringe being brought to the center, this normalization of will. And that's why I think we're debating even still now that, it's happened, a lot of people were afraid to say Islamophobia, right? So there was a lot of outrage, why aren't you just calling it for what it is? It affected other communities too, but there was a blatant, we're going to come attack mosques type vibe going on.
Why do you think people were, why do you think it was controversial to call it Islamophobic?
I mean, I think there's always this kind of skirting around the issue in our politics, particularly with the previous government who really contributed massively to the situation, and people like Farage and Tommy Robinson.
And Elon Musk, bizarrely.
Wow. I mean, I can't even believe Elon Musk weighing in on the situation. I don't know. I think there's a sense that gives it a legitimacy as well to, call it for what it actually is, and policymakers then have to do something about it, right? So, but I mean, is there any more convincing evidence?
Because I was talking to my friends and Muslims and non-Muslims about this and asking them how they felt, and they really fell on two sides of the argument. There were the Muslims who were completely outraged, and they talked about their parents' memories of National Front and saying how, whether we've had a few good years where it feels like we were part of diversity and inclusion initiatives, and we were, being built up as feeling like we were more part of it. Part of it. Of all of it. But now everyone feels like beneath the surface, if you just look a little bit beneath the surface, it could all kick off. And that underlying racism is always there within society. And maybe we will never be seen as fully belonging. I don't know.
That's sad, though. That's sad. It's hard to...
Do you think...
What was the other side?
The other side were... So this was from non-Muslims, and they really saw a legitimacy behind some of the questions being asked, which was interesting. Yeah. And they were like, well, we do have a problem with immigration. And, there are grooming gangs.
The kind of justification type.
Yeah. It's like, there are, and people, what's wrong with asking these questions? And, someone like Elon Musk is a very well-known public figure who, autobiographies and, massive interviews on the Joe Rogan podcast, all of this. So he's a very smart guy. He must know what he's talking about. So that's the other side. And then I think the most interesting one to me was people saying that, well, you're not that kind of Muslim.
Oh, the exceptional, yeah.
And it's like, you're the acceptable face, right? It's like, what does that mean?
You're born here.
It's like, well, yeah, you're born here.
Different.
You went to school in like a
Kind of one of us type thing.
Yeah, and it's like, oh, you don't have a problem with women, and you don't have a problem with, pubs and all of this kind of thing. I'm like, well, how do you know I don't? Like, how do you know any of this? Like, why do you feel like I'm somehow this tame Muslim, which is, more British, or British values are
More
rubbed off on me?
acceptable.
Yeah. Like, I don't know. I think a lot of us are asking these questions and none of us really know the answers right now.
No, I think that's such a great analysis of it, because that's exactly the kind of breadth of view and opinion. I mean, look, obviously, majority of Britons were appalled, outraged, terrified, afraid. And we saw that on the Wednesday when tens of thousands of people came out across the country, very famously Walthamstow.
Walthamstow, absolutely.
Yeah. But a lot of people came out in neighbourhoods all over the country to just it's a very symbolic kind of solidarity. So there's this kind of general acceptance that we don't think that is the right thing on our streets. I mean, they burned libraries, destroyed citizens' advice bureaus, attacked mosques, refugee hotel. There's a real cross-section of carnage on the streets. But I think what you're talking about is the undercurrent of that, where it's people like Farage and Tommy Robinson. They're able to speak to cross-sections of people who've been in cycles of deprivation and poverty, really latent stuff, or communities where that cohesion just hasn't happened, and people have just been put together in a really haphazard way. And that's where people are like, where's the legitimate place for conversation? So I wouldn't say this riot in some ways represents anything justifiable, because it was just absolute criminality. But I think what you're talking about is people who try and have this, like Farage, just on the line before it becomes illegal, right? So spreading misinformation, talking about, well, Muslims, the place in England, they don't speak English. The young Muslims don't have British values, And obviously we've got, prior to this, the Gaza stuff in Palestine and how, people have perceived that on the streets. And then Tommy Robinson, sitting from his hotel and kind of
in Cyprus.
Yeah, in Cyprus, inciting. So I think a lot of things are being conflated, right? And this reasonable voice argument, it doesn't work. And I think for us, the challenge is precisely that point, which we cannot accept a narrative that says we're not going to ever be accepted. We should just throw that in the bin, actually. The narrative is we've realized where there's a lack of actual resilience, there's a lack of what isn't working. So, this, because we're very passive sometimes as communities.
Yeah,
it's fine.
For sure.
So now you realize, well, actually, in the policy arena, we're very weak, right? How is good community outreach to policing? And, so everything was tested in some ways.
Looking back on it, you've been through so much through your time as Secretary General.
I know, I think we really need a break.
You went through the conflicts in Gaza, the Muslim vote, the riots that happened recently.
Michael Gove also tried to ban us.
Did he?
Yeah, he did.
Tried to ban you?
The government, remember the new extremism definition? And they put a whole bunch of us on a list.
Really?
Yeah, did you miss that?
I missed that one.
That was just around Ramadan. You may have.
This Ramadan? Oh,
yeah,
this Ramadan.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Michael Gove and his extremists, we were headlining, but we didn't get included. So that was a bit, exciting for me too.
Okay.
It's basically one crisis after another.
Wow.
Relentless.
So how have you dealt, going back to the whole leadership theme?
As like a human being.
Yeah. How do you feel like you're just swinging from one crisis to another, or do you have like a framework for how you're dealing with this?
I think every leader realizes that you get the circumstances that are very, you're there because you need to be there to handle it. So Muslims in our very nature and history, unfortunately, have been primed to be very reactive. We are always engaging with our environment and often having to react to it because we're not framing it or shaping it. And that's just because we're a minority community, right? And we're all full politicized. So if you look at the rhetoric around Muslims and Islam in Britain, not really changed much. I think we were really good heroes in COVID. Bar that, the silent majority of us that are part of British society, cool, but the media and political framing is still very divisive. So we're scapegoated with immigration, asylum, criminality, terrorism. It's usually very negative. Even Islamophobia, it just brings connotation of negativity. So one thing that I have to accept is I'm operating in a very wild and reactive place. But the other side of it, which is the bit I do actually enjoy, is the community development work. So I visited over 300 organisations across the UK.
Wow.
So when the restrictions eased, I said to myself, a good leader should know her people. So I should go visit them, right? Blackburn, Dewsbury, Newport,
Oh, really?
Swansea,
Okay.
Leicester, Liverpool, Leeds, Aberdeen.
So you spent your whole life touring?
I just keep going around. I sit in the chairman's seat at the masjid.
Wow.
I sat with the scholars, the politicians, and the community, because I wanted to know, like, who are Muslim communities today?
Yeah.
Do they actually think we represent them? And how can we serve them?
And what did
right?
you find?
And first of all, a community, they're just amazing, right? So locally, there's so much good work happening. A women's group who set up mental health charities. There probably isn't a food bank in a mosque in the country that doesn't have a food bank, which isn't great. But hey, as in locally, there's so much good work happening. Whether it's the ESOL classes, the elderly community staff, whatever, poverty relief, refugee support. Tidy, keep your neighborhood clean, all that stuff. So Muslims are a driving force for a lot of social good, very charitable. But obviously that's all completely lost. The second thing is it's a very young population.
Yeah, 50% of us below the age of 25.
Yeah, right? So a lot of our communities are very young. But with that young youthfulness comes a lack of opportunity in jobs, especially in some of the most deprived areas that we reside in the UK. But I think even with that, there's still so much good going on. So one thing I found was that, look, we're super diverse. We do lots of good work and we're very local, actually. So there's a lot of good stuff happening locally. The challenges haven't changed, really. Economic deprivation is still high. Our lack of representation at the highest levels of employment. And for Muslim women, even getting employment itself. And then when I asked them, do you still think we represent you? They were like, yeah, after telling me off, of course. What are you guys doing? But there was a sense that, yeah, we do need a national representative body that can represent us on these big critical issues. And we need to see more impact on that. And I think in terms of like, well, what do we need? And that comes back to what we're talking about, which is what is the national vision that we have for ourselves in this country? We're not going anywhere. What is the narrative that we want to be creating about who we are? And for young people, it's not about we're really British, right? I think we're past that now. We've done the whole, Mo Salah and Nadia from the Bake Off and all that stuff. The really good Muslims.
Yeah.
I think what we're saying now is that we are part of the fabric of the society and part of the story, but we're not very good at telling our story.
Do you think it's because I think the conversation almost changed as soon as the riots ended from being about immigration to integration?
Yeah.
And then, the old Nigel Farage quote about, streets of people who don't speak English and all of that came about. I think I agree with you. I think certainly in my youth, I went to a school where I was one of the few Muslims there. I think you can relate to that. Yeah. So
there was 3 ethnic minorities in my class.
Gosh, okay. So it felt a bit weird and jarring to be a bit different, not just because, skin tonally you're more melanin than other people, but you believe in something that other people don't. And I think there was this overwhelming desire to kind of try and fit in, but also kind of knowing that you never quite would. But now it's really heartening to see that people are really proud. People are really, really proud to be Muslim. They're proud to show people they're praying 5 times a day or fasting Ramadan and all that kind of thing. But how do you balance that with making other people feel uneasy or look at this group and they'll never really be British and accept these British values?
I mean, it's you obviously have to have a certain attitude and mentality that this is the fringe, right? This is not the norm. This is not the majority. And I think our parents' generation, they in some ways gave us the opportunity to do different. So look, now we're in lots of spaces. Muslims are like everywhere. part of the challenge, I guess, for some people. Like for example, we've got Siddiq Khan the mayor. We talk about these political examples, right? But also Hamza Yusuf when he was first minister as well. I think, and even Rishi Sunak in some ways. I think there's a visibility at lots of different levels of ethnic minorities and Muslims in places and spaces we've never really been at, with a confidence that we've never had before and an articulation of that confidence. So I know you have lots of people like the tech space, business and entrepreneurship, startup, like even fashion. And so we as ourselves are so diverse, right? I've been contacted by the National Theatre, for example, or, arts and creatives.
Really?
Yeah. So because we're all really different and some of us don't want to go into traditional jobs and then wander off and find ourselves to be the only Muslim in the room saying, right, what are you doing about Islamophobia, right? So I think things are just changing organically, but we have to understand that we are a minority, that not everybody gets it. The lay person who may just not really understand why we need to pray 5 times a day, what halal is, why we're all out at Ramadan at 11 o'clock at night, why our parking is so terrible on Fridays.
Gosh, I know.
You know, so sometimes we have to understand that we have to share in a way that community. So we've got Visit My Mosque coming up, for example.
Okay.
It's a nationwide campaign. Mosques open their doors for tea talks and tours. The general public get to come in. And it was really inspired by people were thinking, oh, you're breeding terrorists in there. What's going on? What are you guys doing in those mosques, right? And I volunteered a couple of years ago, and a guy said, I walked by this mosque for 28 years. And today I've come in with my family.
Wow.
And about his kids, and he goes, because they go to school and I want them to know more about their Muslim.
That's crazy. If you think about that, it's like, okay, there's this building here, all these people go in. What's going on in there?
But think about it. If you're just kind of like, you're a normal person, you're just a normal person. We do look a bit different.
Yeah, of
we're
course.
Colourful. We're a bit noisier sometimes.
We have better food.
We congregate a lot. We love to, after after Jummah chats
of
and
course.
stuff.
Of course.
The parking is a bit of an issue, isn't it?
Yes.
So you can imagine like Jane across the road kind of just like, what's going on? The other thing was someone said to me, where are the women? We don't see the women. I was like, no, we are there. But a lot of the photography or the imagery about the visualization of Muslims is very male focused and very much the picture of the mosque is lots of men. And so part of our demystifying is obviously Muslim women being very visible, very public, which is helpful when we being elected. But also think about the imagery that's conjured up by the tabloid media and the far right and commentators who really, for the last 20 plus years, maybe beyond that, have created a caricature Muslim. And so if you've never met a Muslim, if you live in the UK, you've never met a Muslim before, what do you think about that person? What are the connotations? So we have to come from a place of understanding and empathy that we may perceive it as racist, but maybe they just are really ignorant. They just don't.
Yeah, for
they
sure.
actually just don't know. We went to schools where, you're right, we did stick out like a sore thumb. You're trying to fit in, but you just can't really fit in. But people don't get it. They're just like, what are you guys? What do you want to pray? And then we're like bowing and stuff. You're at the airport, foot sink situation.
Yeah, of course.
We've got our moments, guys. We're curious. But look, Ramadan is a fixture in the British calendar.
That's great. And the Ramadan Lights campaign.
Amazing.
So
changed
the game.
Things have really transformed. I had colleagues talk to me about when their employers were like, don't think we're going to give you special treatment just because you're fasting. And now it's like a really different attitude.
Now there's people putting out notices saying,
can we get a guide?
Yeah.
Ramadan buddy. So there was a corporate company. They were like, yeah, we're going to fast. We're going to do a Ramadan challenge. We want to know what it's like. So you'll experience that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in Big Four, I was at Deloitte and then PwC. They were fantastic for that. But I did experience going to a very small company called Alpha. They were only about 100 people, and I went from being part of like a community of hundreds of Muslims to suddenly being the only Muslim in a company.
Gosh.
So that was like, okay, gosh, I need to start from
Square
scratch
one again.
Yeah, literally. It's like, okay, I need a place to pray. It's like, oh, okay. And they were kind enough to give me a space, right? So that was nice. But when you're I was in consulting, you're off to, flying around the world and you're at client site. You have to have that conversation. You start from scratch, basically all over again, every single client site you're in. So I was in the Netherlands, I was in Scotland for a bit. I did Ramadan in Edinburgh.
That's tough.
It was like 20 hours.
Longer hours.
That's crazy. I should ask you that out the gate. How do you do it?
Longer people.
Probably.
The hardest was this couple summers ago when it was that 20 hours really like, by the time you opened your fast, you went for Tarawih, then you were doing suhoor, and then you're like,
it's like, what is happening?
Sitting on the sofa at Asr time, like, I've still got 4 hours to go, whatever. And I think, you're so right. I mean, talking about people in work, for example, right? It's so hard being the only Muslim and having to explain it, especially because we're all in a different place of religiosity, right?
Of course,
so you don't really know all the answers and what to say. And we have people emailing, so there's no mosque nearby and I can't get a space at work. So sometimes people are not interested in being accommodating. And sometimes you've got to be, a lot of these Muslim networks, they said that they were the early ones that created the network, and people were like, why do you need a network for Muslims? What's the point? Why can't you just go pray after work? Why do you need halal food in the canteen? Or, why do you need to go for Friday prayer? Or they find some Muslim that says you don't need to.
That's the thing.
You get that guy, that one guy's like, yeah, you just combine it. And you're like, no. So So it's challenging, but I think we've come a long way from where we were before, and we've still got a long way to go.
So what does the future look like for yourself and Muslim Council of Britain?
Oh gosh.
What do you want to focus on?
The journey of leadership is hard and turbulent and, a roller coaster. I mean, I think I would say I was elected at 29. I feel like I'm 55 now. I hang out with a lot of 50 plus.
Okay.
That's kind of who my inner circle is now. So personally, I'd like to go back to people in their 30s, like to know what they do. How do people have fun? How people go on breaks? I don't know if I'll ever be able to go back to normality.
Yeah, I mean, what would happen? Because this is your second term.
So I've got 6 months to go.
Okay.
So this is whoa, right?
And then would you
No, I can't rerun.
You can't rerun.
It's finished.
Okay, fine.
What? But I feel every moment not to worry.
Okay.
Fans. I mean, my work in service won't end.
Okay.
So there'll always be things, inshallah, I'll help to do and support, and the work is never ending nonetheless. I think the MCB is at a really critical juncture, as is Muslim communities. We're always at a critical juncture, though, aren't we? Post-election, we've just had these riots. Gaza's still ongoing. Hate crime is rife. I think the state, the establishment, the government is still working out how it's engaging with Muslims and what's the plan. And we're working out what's our plan.
Yeah.
Less and less of our youngsters want to go into community leadership positions. Community institutions need to transform a lot. So a lot of our work is around, well, are we fit for purpose? Where's our governance, safeguarding? So we've got the internal stuff to sort out. We need to get our houses in check. So that, because young people are digital now.
Yeah.
You might have more followers than the Imam, right? So people are getting their Islamic knowledge from TikTok.
Yeah, 100%.
Right? So
I'm one of those people.
Yeah, we all are. We're the doom school. We get snippets and stuff, and they kind of, if you're a really popular, you might not even be a sheikh, but if you're kind of Islamic views and you're on TikTok, right? So one side of it is internally, we need to be ready for that real big demographic that we have of youngsters who are not interested in traditional means of Islamic education, of the organizational framework, more about the individual, but who are going to be the workforce.
Absolutely.
So we have to prepare them for that and create the opportunities. And the other side of it is our political representation at a national, local, regional level. How do we engage in public life? And we've got such a long journey to go, because whilst we're a minority, we're so visible and so politicized. And we've got a lot of things to say.
Yeah.
And, Gaza, I think, was a real inflection point for us. The whole thing was where are we? We've done all this work, what's going on? I think a lot of apathy came from that. The elections was really heated. So I think we've woken up to the fact that we've got to make some adjustments. And the MCB, I don't think, is the solution to everything, but it will continue. It's 27 years old now. It will remain a really important part of that story and future leadership. There's a lot of work to be done. And for me, I'm very hopeful, because I think people like yourself and many others in the space are making loads of positive. We had the Muslim Tech Fest.
Yeah, that was incredible.
Loads of great innovative things coming through.
Absolutely.
And cultural capital, social capital, economic capital. It's not just about the community space. That's one part of our story. But we have Muslim businesses in finance and industry contributing billions, the halal economy, the Muslim pound, charity sector is huge. So I think there's just a little bit of thinking to be done around
the messaging.
And collective vision.
Yeah.
And feeling optimistic and confident. Someone asked me, I was doing some international media, post-riots, they're like, is it safe to be a Muslim in the UK? It was proper, oh my God.
Yeah, people now have this image that
it's just awful. I mean, we're looking at the footage,
of course,
Islam in the UK. And I was like, Britain's one of the best places to be a Muslim. Yeah, I've traveled around the world as you have. And, there's literally no better feeling than when I land back and I feel, we've got a lot of things going for us. But there is a deep-seated institutional systemic nature of this problem. It's not new. It's very old. It resurfaces, but it must be tackled in a long-term way. And we've got to operate differently.
I'm really hopeful for the future. I mean, as we're now second, third, fourth, fifth generation in some cases. In some cases, each one is getting better educated. They are creating more generational wealth. They're taking benefit from that. They're becoming leaders in society. I love looking at the Tower Hamlets community where so many, Bangladeshis came over and maybe they were running restaurants or driving taxis.
What a team.
But yeah, now their kids are, running financial institutions or really high up in all kinds of law firms or big four. So they're just just killing it here.
I think we've got to be pioneers in a change for everybody, and that's the nature of Islam itself. It beautifies and helps wherever it is. And that's the point, that we're not just taking care of Muslims. So one of the messaging of the far right is we exceptionalize ourselves and we expect preferential treatment. We would never agree with that. But that's the view. Oh, look at these migrants, look at these immigrants, Our communities couldn't get jobs and created ecosystems. They hired each other. They created shops and businesses and created economies, right? And so it's that kind of enterprising generation. And we've got a heavy task on our shoulders to continue. But as you said, I think I'm confident that things will continue to change. And part of our role, and my role, even being Secretary General, I'm the youngest, and all those other things, is like be a bit disruptive and change things and say, hey, uncles, right? Come on now. We've got to get things sorted. But also to stick it to the media and to be, it was actually my birthday recently.
Happy birthday.
I know, thank you very much. But what was it doing? I did 9 interviews that day.
Oh my God.
Blue riots were taken off. And I was like, oh gosh. So duty always calls. But the reason I take it, and I did Newsnight and Sky and LBC and did all the tough ones, is someone has to do it, right? Someone has to challenge the narrative and do it in a way that people find very articulate and confident, right?
What are we going to do without you?
I know. You could call me nonetheless. I'm always at service of the community. But the reason I did it is, for a long time when I was growing up, we were also scared of the media. And we were scared to take an interview. And it was ferocious. And now I've been taking those interviews. They're still ferocious, but it's the sense that I'm not going to be framed. There are legitimate issues and we should articulate them. So one of my big interviews with LBC with Ian Dale, it was drive time. There was no crisis. I just did it. Lots of tough questions. And it was a really positive experience, but it was because I said we just shouldn't be scared. And it's easy to say not everybody needs to do media and stuff, but it's part of the challenge, which is we've got to have a story about who we are, be confident. And also as believers, as Muslims, it comes with the territory, right? We've got to do the hard shifts.
Absolutely, absolutely. Gosh, we're running out of time, but I'd love to ask you some rapid fire questions, if you like. So, first question. Do you know how many female imams there are? I'm joking.
Oh my God. You'll need
I'm
to
joking.
check all the blog posts that were written about that concept. So
don't worry. That was just a nice little softball question to warm me up to that. What do you think is different about being a British Muslim compared to, I don't know, Muslims in America or anywhere else in the West?
I don't know. I think we're just better. I shouldn't say that. I think we're very British. We're really British. Like, when you travel and you realize you care about cues and organization and
there's a weird thing where you can always tell.
You can tell
that someone's like, oh, okay, that person's from Bolton.
In Hajj and Umrah, and the Saudis get really annoyed that you guys complain so much. We're just like, look at the disorder here,
Yeah.
I think we actually do have a lot of Britishisms about us.
Okay.
But yeah, we're very organized. I don't know. I just think.
Yeah, just love cues.
We love cues. We like to be organized. We like structure. We love a bit of structure.
Okay.
Terribly boring answer. I have no idea.
Okay, so it's rapid fire. So let's keep going. So that's what it means to be a British Muslim. Next, what do you want to see change within Muslim communities in the next 5 years? Like, if you had to pick one thing you want to see a big change in.
I just want to see lots of young people leading.
Okay.
Institutions, employment, just enterprising. I think there's going to be a rise of just incredibly talented Muslims just really taking the fore.
Okay.
And just being so visible and diverse. I think that would be it.
Fantastic. Yeah. Fantastic. So you mean like entrepreneurship? Or?
So yeah, I think there should just be the seismic shift of where we see across every sector and field lots of really young, confident Muslims just owning it and killing it and just smashing it out the park. And it's not just the community space thing, but I think, we just see exceptional Muslims and they all tend to have very exceptional stories. And I think actually there's so many youngsters who are just doing great work. They've created businesses, they've set up, franchises, whatever it is.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All of it at the same time. Let's take it over.
Okay. Favorite moments from your leadership kind of career, whether it's MCB or FOSIS?
Oh my God. Oh, that's so tough. Look, I love talking to the schools.
Okay.
And one of my favorite moments was visiting a kind of madrasa. I think it was in Newport. And one of the young boys, I know, really small community, but they were the cutest kids. They were like, oh, I want to do medicine. So my colleague, they were asking, how many chemistry tests do you need to do? But the young boy, I think it was about 10, he said to me, so you've achieved a lot in your life. Are you proud of yourself? And I was like, OMG, what to do, right? And I was just so struck by his question. It was almost as hard as when my mum said after 4 months, so what have you done? But the reason it was one of my favorite moments is that young people say things that really kind of put into perspective what your role really is. So really love the schools, visiting young people, and of course kind of got featured in Vogue. So
did you?
Yeah, I did, yeah. But
I
it's
missed
not
that in the
obviously,
research.
but it was more about what it meant. I mean, a lot of mums and girls said to me, you don't know what this means.
Wow.
To my young daughters who wear a headscarf, like to be featured for who you are, not for fashionista or blog star or whatever, to be featured as a representative of our communities in this massive fashion publication. And it just really meant so much for like the girls.
Yeah.
And I was like,
Wow.
I know.
Wow. That's a very good moment. On the other side, most difficult moment.
In Gaza.
Really?
It was so difficult because we all felt so powerless. And I think it just was, and it still is just so difficult. But at that particular moment, we're heartbroken looking at what we're seeing. Everyone's expecting us to fix it, or everyone from every space but we're the leadership. We're like the highest kind of level of it. What are you doing? How are you sorting this out? And I think the pressure cooker of it was so difficult, and the stakes really was life and death type stuff. And
it still is. In
it still
5
is,
weeks'
right?
time, it will have been a year since the conflict restarted.
But I think at that time there was no handbook for this situation, and I think that was still really, really. You can feel what that moment was for our communities, and still is. And it's had a wave, it's had a ripple effect ever since. I think that was really tough.
Gosh.
Yeah, I know.
Gosh. Well, just on behalf of a lot of the Muslim communities, thank you for everything you've done and keeping your head when most of us would have lost it in some pretty difficult interviews. So,
I think all thanks to Allah for the opportunity to serve, the benefit. And of course, like we just give it a go and see what happens. Don't take life too seriously, and remember, you're not going to fix it yourself. That's not the point. We just do our bit and hope for the best. And the final thing that I'd say is that, whilst my role is really important and the work that I do and all that stuff, what's so much more important is what everybody else does. Local communities, people like yourself, this podcast and everything else. Those little bits are good.
Oh, we're a tiny little
they help make
piece in this.
my job a lot easier to talk about who Muslims truly are and what they're capable, what they do.
Gosh.
And I think for me, it's inspiring to see, like, where we are. We're getting there. But yeah, someone's going to do those tough stories.
Yeah, gosh, of course.
Someone's going to take the interview, but I'll be on hand nonetheless.
Okay. I think we'll leave it there, Zara. Thank you so much for your time. And we look forward to having you back in the future. Maybe after MCB when you're doing the next big, incredible thing. Exciting. Or just having cake and tea and chilling. If that's yeah, you definitely deserve a break. But no, thank you so much. I really enjoyed it. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Muslim Money Talk podcast. If you like what you heard, then please subscribe to Muslim Money Talk wherever you might have been listening to this. Give us a like and share it with someone who you think might be interested. It really, really helps us out. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum, and see you next time.